For the next hour, we're talking to the talented, the successful, and the very highly regarded Russell Watson. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk to me. How are you?
I'm great. That was a fantastic build-up. Thank you so much.
You really do deserve it because you're one of the few people that can actually sing. And I spend my entire career talking to bands, talking to groups, and talking to artists that really can't do what they claim to do. And I've got to say that it's got to be to do with your upbringing and the fact that you've done the clubs and you've worked hard. I can't also believe that you weren't born singing beautifully.
No, I wasn't. I was born screaming in Salford. Going back to what you were saying about the music industry as a whole, as it stands right now, it's very disappointing, isn't it? That there doesn't really seem to be much substance out there, and you only kind of need to look at the charts to see that. You know, the likes of the pop idols and so on. Whatever happened to the four guys from Merseyside who used to meet in the local youth club each weekend, jam around, they were best pals, they went to school with each other, they used to drink in the local boozer, and they became the biggest band in the world. You know, the Beatles. Those stories, they seem to have gone, or they're not as prominent as they used to be. I hate to say this, but we've become obsessed with celebrity.
Also, it seems to be so organised now that if they're not guaranteed to get a number one, I don't think anybody will take the risk. And I would love to know how unpolished the Beatles were before they actually became big.
They were invested in, somebody took time with them, they developed their personalities, they developed their music, they became better musicians, and as a result of that, they grew. And they became one of the biggest bands in the world. But if they hadn't have been nurtured, they would never have happened. And I think what's lacking is exactly right in what you say, is that record companies in general now are only betting on dead certs. They see somebody come out of the traps, they see pop idols, they think, here's a group of guys who are being watched by between 8 and 10 million people every week. It's a guaranteed winner. We know what's going to happen. We're going to go in with them. Bang! They're going to be a massive success. They're going to sell a load of records. And then next year, it'll be the next group of kids. And they'll be forgotten. And that's the sad thing about it, is that there are people out there there are kids out there who are getting all their hopes up. They're selling a bundle of records. They're successful for maybe 1 or 2 years. And then it's kind of like the next big thing comes along and their history, and that's a great shame. Nobody's taking the time anymore to develop careers.
I don't know where it goes from here, though, because from what I see at the moment, I might be wrong. Where's Gareth Gates now? Where's the girl that won Pop Idol last time?
Where's Hearsay?
So where do you go from here? If the bands that they are investing in are no good, and they're not investing in any other bands. I mean, there's an article in the newspaper today as I was coming here saying in the boy band category, there's now McFly, and that's it. What do you think is going to happen?
What's going to happen is we're going to see Tony Christie records at number 3 in the national charts. And I mean, that's what happened the other week. I think we're going to see Elvis Presley at number 1.
How does that happen? Because I don't understand. Help me with this. If you're a fan of Elvis, surely you would have every single Elvis song already. How can he get to number 1?
Well, that's a question that I'm asking as well. How can Elvis Presley get to number 1? He has a massive fan base worldwide. We all love Elvis. I'm a big Elvis Presley fan. I love the old Elvis stuff. I grew up listening to it. But how can he get to number 1 now, all these years later, above our own homegrown talent? How on earth can he achieve that success? It is absolutely incredible. It's unbelievable. How can Tony Christie, years and years after his success, have a greatest hits record in the charts above all our great talents? Why aren't we breaking our artists in the United States? Is it because the United States are better than us? Is it because they're producing better talent than us? What is it? What's the reason? Is it because they don't like us? I don't think so.
How many albums do you have to sell now? Or more importantly, how many singles do you have to sell now to get to number 1? Because I don't believe it's that many.
No, it's not. I mean, there was a recent chart report that I think suggested that the figure for the number 1 record of a certain week not so long ago was the lowest recorded in the history of the charts, and it was around about 25,000 units. And it's incredible. And yet you can see the exact opposite of the spectrum, and you can see the pop idols or whoever it may be, whatever program it is where you've got 3 or 4 panelists sat behind a desk telling everybody who they think's good and who they don't think's good in their own humble opinions, going straight in at number 1 and doing 200,000 or 300,000 records in 1 week and completely cornering the market. They're totally and utterly soaking up the market with one record. So the record companies now are looking for just one record to make them their money, because what's happening is you've got artists, 20, 30 artists each week releasing records, and they're all doing minimal sales. They're not doing big sales.
If you went on Pop Idol today, do you think you'd get through?
When I was doing the working men's clubs, I was offered various opportunities. Now, bearing in mind that I was kind of between £90 and £120 a gig artist, so not a huge amount of money, and I was doing maybe 2 or 3 gigs a week, and there were certain opportunities like Search for a Star things that came in, Stars in Their Eyes. There was a couple of talenty type competition things, TV things at the time, and I said no to them all. I didn't want to get categorised. If, let's say, for argument's sake, I'd have gone on Stars in Their Eyes as Elvis Presley, and I'd have won as Elvis Presley. Forevermore, I'd be known as Elvis Presley. All right, that's Russell Watson who was Elvis Presley. There would be no hope whatsoever of me getting a record deal or establishing my own career, because I've established myself as somebody else. I've established myself as another artist, and there hasn't been one single artist from Stars in Their Eyes in the long history that it's been running that's ever achieved a record contract and had success, apart from the Christy Berg guy, who I think entered the charts at, in the top 20.
I want to know the pressure that you're under now in terms of CD sales. If for some unknown reason you didn't sell CDs in your next release, would they drop you like that?
No, they wouldn't. No, I don't think they would. If I had a complete flop, then I think they would probably wait to see what happened on the record after that. I've been very fortunate to have had 4 successful records, and I think if they were to gamble on a 5th, as a solo artist. Now, a lot of these people, like Jerry and a lot of the other artists, have come from bands, and they've kicked in their own solo career. They're not 5 records down the line. They may be 1 or 2 records down the line, and they're being dropped, which I think is, in essence, is very sad. It's very sad that they should be given at least 2 or 3 records to kind of establish themselves, but they're not. They're being given one chance. They come out of a band, they give them one chance. If Robbie hadn't been successful on his first record, he wouldn't be around now. I'm telling you, I guarantee you that. But he was. It was a huge success, and then the rest is history. He's one of the biggest names that the UK has to offer right now on a world platform. He sells massively everywhere. Everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, Robbie's one of the best-selling artists. But that's not going to happen with very many other artists, because they're not going to get given the chances, and the budgets aren't around anymore.
It's interesting now that there are a lot of people somewhat stepping on your toes. I did an hour special with Il Divo at Christmas, and their album, frankly, is virtually the same songs that you do on your first album. We've now got G4, who I don't personally rate, and they're all very good singers, but I don't know why they would possibly dream of doing Bohemian Rhapsody. And it's interesting to me that they would have one guy who's twice as loud as everyone else and 6 octaves higher than any man can normally reach a note. Help me with that.
I put TV on the other morning. It was ITV, Channel 3. An ad came on, a TV commercial, and it was, I can't remember the name, but let's just say, Joe Bloggs, the Intimate Classical Collection. And then it was like, Nella Fantasia, an Intimate Classical Collection by Joe Bloggs. And then a little bit of time went on, and the next TV commercial came on, and it said, Steve Smith, the Intimate Collection. Buy the new Steve Smith record, classics and pop combined. And there was about 3 on that morning, and I thought to myself, hold on a minute, I did this 5 years ago. And there was 3 on that morning, 3 different artists, all doing exactly the same thing, all doing and it's so amusing to see that, that there's something is something works, and then everybody's doing it.
Is it flattery or is it annoying?
In a way, I think it's good for this type of music. It's what I kind of wanted from the start, to make classical music more acceptable and make classical music mainstream. Mainstream is the word that I'm looking for, because classical music has now developed its own life, in essence. It's become something that has kind of run away from its roots, and long may that continue.
Do you think they're any good, these people?
Well, it would be kind of rude for me to say whether I rated them or not. All I can say to you is I do think that it's very sad that there doesn't seem to be that much substance in a lot of the new artists. And the ones that I've seen being interviewed all seem to have got my story.
Yes, they're all very northern, aren't they?
I came from a working class background, and I used to work in a factory. This is what I heard somebody recently. I'm from a working class background, and I used to work in a factory, and my mum and dad didn't have much money when I were growing up, so all they could afford for Christmas was a couple of Weebles. We couldn't afford the garage or the houses, and that's my story. And I thought, this is amazing, because a lot of these people are reciting exactly what my story was. So get your own gig.
I mean, you're certainly in a world of your own at the moment in terms of your touring ability. You've done some of the most amazing venues. You performed to some of the most fascinating and interesting people. We're going to get into that next. We'll take another piece of music now and calm things down in terms of the music industry. I don't want to get you annoyed, by the way. This is the thing. I don't want to get you started.
You're probably going to get me sacked.
Well, that'd get me in the papers, I suppose, wouldn't it? I want to play this one now. Funicular, I just think is one of those songs that if anybody can't raise a smile to it or start tapping their foot or start laughing when you hear it, I don't know what's wrong with them, because it's just fun, isn't it?
It's one of my concert favourite. Funicular actually means the cable car. The cable car.
Is that right?
And it's about a guy who's jumping on a cable car to travel up the hill and down the hill to get to his girlfriend. That's the gig. That's what it's about. It's insane, isn't it? And you're all going funicular. The cable car.
Oh, please do a version of that in your next concert. That would be fabulous. How did you deal then with the Italian in the beginning? Because I always fear whenever I speak French, it's like a mock French. And you're doing all of this. And when you're doing Italian, sempre amore, Now, how did you deal with that? Because you're from the Northwest, you're a northern lad, and I can't imagine you singing like you do on these CDs. It's almost like it's two different people. How hard did you work on that, or how did it happen?
I have a natural inbuilt talent, and always have done since I was a child, to mimic accents locally, to mimic people, to mimic stars, to mimic singers. I've always been able to do it. So it's not something that I've worked on or had to work on very hard. It kind of comes quite naturally to me. I'm not saying that I always get it right. I don't. I've got a lot of Italian friends, two in particular, who helped me out immensely with my diction. Basically, that's how everything comes about. Is that I do work now, specifically now. I listen to things back from the first album, and I now know the language much better than I did on record one. And I'll listen to record one and think, oh my God, that's so wrong.
I mean, it would be ridiculous, wouldn't it, if you did these in a mock Italian accent? I mean, you've got to get it quite right. And as I say, these songs are just they sound so natural. And that's what I think was appealing about you in the beginning. People saw you in real life and saw you interviewed and thought, that can't be the same guy we've just heard on this track.
Somebody said to me not so long ago, what do you attribute your success to? And they said, was it how you sing or the music you sing? And I said, I don't think it's either. I think what it is that when I released the first record, the story and where I was from and my background and my roots, I think a lot of regular people made a connection with it. They liked it. It was a sweet story. It was a nice story. And also, the fact that there was a lot of critics and a lot of criticism as well at the time, I think just brought that band of people who decided that they were going to be my fans and follow me. It brought them closer, and they became very defensive over me. Another very interesting thing is that I don't seem to get criticised as much these days. I used to get slagged off to hell on the first 2 records, and it kind of went down a little bit on the third, and then by the time I'd got to this record, people are just really kind of leaving me alone now.
Do you think in the beginning it was the Jay McDonald thing? You'd been doing the clubs and you'd been touring and you'd built up this fan base, and then you were trying to be a proper pop star and classical singer, and they weren't quite sure whether you were going to succeed. Now they daren't mock you because your CV is so impressive, anybody would die for it.
I don't know. I just think that there were a certain group of so-called classical elitists who decided one afternoon while sat in their ivory towers in the protection and comfort of their own homes that they didn't like me, and that they, as a result of that, the so-called classical hierarchy was going to take some pot shots at me because they could see that there was going to be a change. And they're probably sat there now, and they're probably watching Joe Bloggs and Stephen Smith on the morning with their intimate collections and probably thinking, good God, not another bloody Russell Watson.
Did you take it personally at the time? You were trying hard. In the beginning, we didn't know you were going to be this successful.
Originally, I got very upset by it. But after a while, I kind of embraced it and realised that it was part of my career and part of the development of my career and the growth of my career. That indeed, these people who thought that they were hindering were actually helping my career, believe it or not. They created more of an allegiance to myself and my music because of that, because that's where I'm from. I'm from a working class background. My dad still works in the DIY shop and wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I've said to him, Dad, why don't you pack it in and maybe, you can come and do a bit for me? I like it there, lad. I get to meet all the people and they come in and they talk about you, and I like it there, lad. I'm happy where I am. Thanks anyway. But I did give him my TVR. He turns up at the local DIY in a TVR Cerberus.
His car's worth more than his annual wage.
Probably, yeah.
How is it now for you, fitting in your local community? Do they still accept you as Russell Watson, the lad that was touring the clubs, or has it changed?
Well, I don't really. One of the downsides with being a successful artist is that it is difficult to kind of socially fit in locally and so on, because inevitably when I go out, particularly in the Northwest, which is my hometown and where they're very proud of me, everybody wants to, a lot of people want to meet me and say hello and shake my hand, so it's very difficult to get a quiet evening. So that is one of I used to love nothing more, to be honest with you, than kind of popping into the local pub just before I grabbed a takeaway and having a couple of pints with my dad. I really did enjoy that, but it got a little bit difficult, to be honest with you. Not actually locally, say where, maybe, for instance, say in Earlham, where I'm originally from, it wasn't so bad there, but if there was different, like, Chinese restaurants or whatever that I'd go to with my dad and get a pint, and people would be staring and coming over, and are you, Russell? Yeah. And after a while, I thought, I'm probably going to leave it.
Are you remotely interested in being showbiz?
No. You know what? Can I swear?
Probably we can bleep it.
Well, I think all that's I really do. I think the moment that an artist starts to believe their own BS is the beginning of the end for them. You see, I've seen so many artists in the last 5 years, and I've only been selling records now for 5-6 years. It started in 1999. And I've seen so many artists with such big egos waltzing into venues and TV stations and so on that I've been doing with, their heads swelling, and they're gone now. Never believe your own press, ever. I think that's the first rule of show business. You've got to enjoy what you do first and foremost. You've got to enjoy being on stage. You've got to enjoy the job. You've got to enjoy early mornings and late nights. You've got to enjoy all that. Integrating with people, being friendly, chatting, talking about yourself. All those things you've got to enjoy and you've got to embrace. And if you don't, there's no point.
And I think ultimately the one thing that matters, which we were discussing before the programme, is that there's one group of people that will decide whether you're any good, and that's your audience, and whether you can still fill theatres.
That's the acid test. You can go out and sell as many records as you like in the first week. You can be number one for as long as you like. But the acid test is getting on the stage and singing live in front of an audience who've all come to watch you, And it's the first night of the new concert tour, the new world tour, and you're just putting your stage on the road, and you're very nervous and you're not sure. You've got to have a full house. If you don't have a full house, it's the worst feeling in the world to see empty seats scattered around a venue. It really is. I did it for 10 years in the working men's clubs.
I suppose the difference now as well, the people are facing you in theatres and they're actually listening. I mean, that must be frustrating when you're doing the clubs, that people have got another agenda, which is to get drunk.
Someone said to me, you must have been petrified when you went on stage and you did the concert for the Pope at the Vatican, and you knew that there was so many people watching you worldwide, and the Pope and all the cardinals. You must have been petrified. I said, no, I wasn't actually. I wasn't scared at all. I said I was petrified in Wigan Road Working Men's Club when only 5 people came to watch me that night, and they were talking about Coronation Street before I went home. That's petrifying.
We're going to talk about your previous life and the clubs and what it's like to do the clubs and the stories that come from that. We're going to talk about the places you've performed recently, which are just staggering. 90,000 people at the Cup final. We'll talk about that next. We'll take another piece of music first, though, from this new album, and it really is splendid. There's one song in it that I've loved for a long while, and I'm so glad you've done it and done it well. It's a song that's the latest single, You Raise Me Up. Why, firstly, did you want to do this song? Because it's so you.
I heard the track, interestingly enough, about 6-7 months before our friend Josh Groban released the record. And I was going to put it on that disc then, but that disc didn't happen because I got the problem with my voice and had to go to hospital and have an operation, so that record never came out that year. It didn't go ahead. And quite a few other artists jumped on top of the record as well, and they got busy with it, and all of a sudden it became kind of quite a well-known track. But despite the fact that it had become so well-known and had been bandied around and sung by so many different artists over such a short period of time, I just loved it. I wanted to sing it. And people from the label and my producer, they were all trying to convince me, no, it's been done by too many people, don't do it, you shouldn't do it. Closes my show now, it closes my concerts, and it's been one of the most successful tracks and one of the best received tracks on the record.
I don't know whether you know, but I try and sing as well. I sound like a chain coming off a motorbike most of the time. But I did try and sing this just once, and I got about...
Chain coming off a motorbike.
It's true. I did have my voice trained. They put papers down under it. And I can now reach 6 octaves. I've had my legs stretched. I can carry on all night. And the thing is, about this song, I got about 3 bars in, and it was impossible. I mean, it goes so high, this song. How the hell do you do it?
It's what I do. In relative terms, You Raise Me Up is one of the easier things. I mean, if you compare You Raise Me Up to, say, I'll Walk With God or Gladiator, it's a relatively easy sing. Or La Fiamma Sacra, where I do the voice change in the middle. It's got the poppy sensibility at the front, and then I take off with the classical vibe in the middle. Nessun Dorma is a difficult sing. This one is a kind of poppier sing. There's a section in the middle where I do answering lines to the choir. That takes a bit of doing. But again, it's all, I do it all live at the concert. So
you make it sound so normal that you can just sing these notes that are, to me and to the rest of the population, impossible. Were you able to sing from a young age?
I used to sit in my bedroom as a kid and sing along to my mum's Elvis and Cliff Richard and Nat King Cole and Mario Lanza collection, and emulate the sounds that they made, and just assumed that everyone did it. So nobody heard me. I was on my own. I used to be up in the bedroom on my own. If I heard the door go, I'd stop singing. I was so shy or nervous about anybody actually hearing me sing as a kid. The door downstairs going, oh God, I hope they don't hear me sing. And that's the way, that's kind of how I grew up. But I was always able to mimic and sing the songs. And indeed, the very first kind of break that I got all those years ago when I was working in Sabre Repetition, sticking nuts and bolts in a filthy, dirty, smoky, garbagey, horrible, stinky lathe. It wasn't that bad, actually. It was maybe the stinky we can drop. And the garbagey as well was probably over exuberant. But the very first thing that I ever did in the music industry was enter a local talent competition where I sang Neil Diamond's Love on the Rocks. And it was in the style of Neil Diamond, so it was basically a Neil Diamond impersonation. And I won the competition. There was 400 entrants across the Northwest, and I won. I was very surprised. because up until then I didn't really realise that I could sing or that anybody thought anything of my singing. And there I was with a local agent, a guy called Dave Oldfield, slick back grey hair, gold front tooth, so many sovereign gold rings that, I'm surprised he could even lift his hand up to slick back his hair. They must have been that heavy.
So he was like a Del Boy of his day, was he?
Yeah, and he was, oh, Russell, he can really do it for you, my son. He can make you a big star in Manchester, in Withamshire.
And I ended up doing a lot of what he called nice little pubs, which actually weren't particularly nice, if the truth be known. And I'd turn up at these places on Friday night in the middle of wherever it may have been, where there'd be gangs of gentlemen all drinking pints of lager and smoking buckets of cigarettes and swearing and pushing each other around and larking and laughing. And I'd turn up, singing Elton John covers and Neil Diamond covers. And one particular night I was in a place called the Bear's Paw, and this gentleman was stood in front of me with a shaved head, with every single orifice hanging from him, with an earring or something, and he tattoos all over both arms and all over his face, and he kind of stood about as far as I am from you, about 4 or 5 feet, just growling at me like this. And my first number, this is so true, my first number was Stuck on You, got a feeling down deep in my soul that I just can't lose. And this guy stood in front of me, and it was the longest 30 minutes of my entire life. And when I finished, I walked over to him and I thought, you know what, if I'm going to get killed, I'm going to get killed. And I said, I'm sorry, can I help you in any way? And he said, yeah, do you do any Elvis? I said, I do now.
I suppose you wouldn't have any fear now, would you? Nobody would intimidate you. I suppose it is really a great way to learn.
I'm not saying that it was all bad, because it wasn't. There was maybe 80% of it was kind of okay. I'd be stood singing in a pub on a night, I'd be singing Neil Diamond, I'd be Sweet Caroline, and then somebody who'd had about 15 pints of lager would come on, can I have the microphone back, please?
Did you learn ways then to cope with the drunks?
It was one night I was doing a gig in Withenshaw. This place was bouncing. I mean, I walked in and there was a certain smell in the place.
An aroma.
An aroma, yes. A certain aroma, shall we say. And I walked in, and within 5 minutes, they had the microphone off me. They were singing down the mic, and I just thought to them, you know what? You want to do the gig? You do the gig. I'm getting paid. And I just went and sat down, and they sang my songs for about 15 minutes. I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting paid for this. You sing the songs, no problem.
Does it really boil down to that in the end, where you just think, you know what, I'm being paid, I've got to do the same show tomorrow?
It did for a point. It did for a couple of years. And then I remember walking into this venue, and I used to have what I called my autopilot mode. So if I thought the audience wasn't interested, I would switch into autopilot. I'd think, sod you, I'm not interested, you're not interested, so I'm just going to stand here, disappear in my own world, sing my songs, and go home after collecting my cheque. So I would disappear into my own world. But this particular night, the audience, I got in, they were all sat there, come on then, entertain us. And did you see last night's Coronation Street bit? Oh, it was great, wasn't it? Did you see it? Oh, did you see? Oh, it was terrible, wasn't it, eh? Oh, it was absolutely bloody terrible. Did you see what happened to her? Oh, I did, yeah, I know. What's this kid's name again? Rufty what? Rufty Bedspring? Oh, I've heard he's crap. So, and I'd be stood on stage, but this night I thought to myself, you know what? Tonight, Matthew, you're going to listen. I'm going to make you listen. I'm going to get into your ribs. I'm going to work you. I'm going to do my job. And I did. And I never turned back after that. I never turned back. Every night I went on, if I thought I was going to die, I wouldn't switch into autopilot. Move straight into the people that were doing all the talking. I make friends with the noisiest person. So whoever was the noisiest person, I'd go to their table and I'd make friends with them. I'd sit on the table, I'd have a drink out of the pint, I'd pat the wife on the head. Whatever I needed to do, I would do, and I'd win them over. And by the end of the night, they were all gagging for it.
You've performed to 42,000 people at one event, 72,000 people with Pavarotti, 90,000 people at the Cup final. You've done the Sydney Opera House, Carnegie Hall, and you've done the Royal Albert Hall. Does it make any difference where you do your show, or is it just like the club days? Is the venue a venue?
I try to think of each individual gig as being of equal importance, so I don't attach any more significance to one venue to the next. I thoroughly enjoy concerts. I love performing, and when the light's blasting in my face, I could be at the Albert Hall, I could be at Carnegie Hall. It doesn't matter. I will always give 100% because it's me. That's what I do. When I go out there, I want to see the reaction from the audience. I want to feel the feedback, because it could have been so different if I just one different corner turned, one different one conversation not had, one person not being in a certain venue that I was in at a certain time. You know, if Martin Edwards hadn't have been at the Midland Hotel the night that I sang those 3 arias, I wouldn't have ended up singing at Old Trafford, and I wouldn't have got my record deal. I'd probably still be in the clubs. When I walk on stage, I understand what I have and I appreciate it. I never ever think I deserve this and I'm the man. Every time I walk on stage, I say, thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity, for putting me here, for giving me the chance to do what I love to do. I never ever take my success for granted, ever.
Because it can be taken away, and indeed it was when you lost your voice. I mean, this was tragic. Take us through it. One day you woke up and it just wasn't there, or how did it happen where you had to take a year off?
I've been struggling with my voice for a while, and I've been struggling with the top end of my voice. And as you said, you know, before, you know how high my range goes. And if everything, it's kind of like a fine-tuned sports car. If there's one thing not connecting properly, if one of the pistons isn't firing right, or there's the oil isn't right, or if there's one thing wrong in the engine, the car doesn't perform properly. It might drive well in first, second and third gear, but when you bang it into fourth, it starts to struggle. And I was struggling with fourth and fifth gear, you know, I was struggling to go up the gear. And I was also struggling with an area of my voice which is called a falsetto. So that's kind of like the ooh, and all that was happening was a ooh when I was trying to make the noise. And I'd often get that after a concert, but within a couple of days it would be fine, and I'd relax and rest and I'd be fine. But that didn't happen. In fact, weeks went by and I started to get worried, so I went to visit a specialist who stuck a pipe up my nose and down the back of my throat, and they said that I had a lump on my vocal cord. I said, what's the bottom line? They said, well, you'll have to have it operated on because it's a polyp, not a nodule, so it won't go away on its own. And I said, oh dear. And what could that mean? Is there any chance that something could go wrong? And they said, yes, there is. You could lose some of your register. Which register? Which area of my register? Well, it could be the high, could be the low or the mid. We don't know. Or you might actually come back better than ever. We can never tell. It's not like we're doing an operation on Fred the butcher or Joe the barber or Bill the bus driver, where they just come in and have it whipped off and off you go and you're talking normal. You rely on every single area of your vocal cord. You rely on the whole area. That everything is there's everything in there is essential to the way you sing. And that was it. I was petrified. My whole world fell apart. There was no singing for a long, long time. I was scared to death. I'd never been in hospital in my life. I'd never had an operation. I'd never had an anaesthetic. I'd never been put to sleep. I'd never had a tooth out. So I was scared to death.
Were you also angry? Because this could have been the end, couldn't it? It could have finished everything.
I was angry. I was everything. I didn't want to speak to anyone. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything. I did wallow in my own self-pity for a while, and then I decided, come on, lad. You've been through tough times before. You need to get through this. And if it doesn't go right, you need to reassess. I didn't really want to think about it going wrong. I didn't. And I had the operation. I remember as they were wheeling me down to theatre, looking up at watching the lights flashing by on the ceiling and thinking to myself, if there's a God up there, if you're up there, in whatever form, give me another chance and I won't make the same mistakes. Because I got on the proverbial musical industry roller coaster and I felt as though I couldn't say no to anything. I did everything that came my way. I didn't stop. I didn't have holidays. I didn't rest. I was work. Something came in. You can't turn this down. I did it. And I didn't stop. And 3.5 years down the line, the wheels fell off the wagon. And there I was virtually on the scrap heap, thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And what has... Thank God the operation was a success. I believe now, I genuinely believe that I'm singing better, I'm stronger, I'm fitter than I ever was before vocally. My vocal fitness and strength is so much better than it ever has been. And that's been as a result of a lot of hard work. But every time I walk on the stage now, I think to myself, every gig is a bonus.
Have you always been able to trust that when you go for that top note on Nessun Dorma, it would be there?
I'd come to the top note at the end of the night and I'd be thinking, please. What was happening was I was hitting the note, and because there's this little lump was creating a form of a type of blockage in my voice box. So as I was hitting the top note, the vocal cords flap at such an incredible rate, and the higher you go, the thinner they get and the more they vibrate. And what happens with the vibration is the slightest little connotation or the slightest little idiosyncrasy or indifference can create a huge difference to the sound of your voice. And I recorded most of record 3 towards the end with that thing, and you can hear that throaty sound in a lot of the pop voices. In the song that I did for Star Trek, I recorded it for Enterprise, and you can hear a real kind of Rod Stewart rocky voice, which was great for the rock stuff but not very good for the classical stuff.
Are you fully better now? Are you absolutely happy with your voice now?
My voice now is better than it has ever been. I have worked very, very hard on getting it right. I worked 4 solid months with my new coach, Patrick McGuigan, on getting the thing absolutely bang off and right on the money. And I believe that I've got it on the button now. And I feel so fortunate that I've got it back on the money again. And I feel so good about the fact that I've got it back. It really feels great. I can't begin to explain. I can't put into words what it feels like to go on stage and sing the songs that I was struggling with 12 months ago.
Well, congratulations. This new album, Amore Musica, is just brilliant. I mean, we've played all your CDs, and frankly, I think they were all great.
Thanks.
I've supported you from the beginning. That ability to be able to sing naturally is so rare now, and you hear it with all the new bands. They're not really them. You can hear the processing, you can hear all that, but the fact that you can just walk on stage and wow people, I think, is marvellous. You performed for the Queen, royalty, Bush at the White House. That must have been interesting. Did he understand a word you said?
Yeah, he kind of came over at the end of the day and said, that was really great, Russell. I said, thank you so much. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was doing a tour of Europe. He said, maybe you can come on Air Force One and sing a couple of songs for us. I said, no, I'm busy myself, love.
There's nothing he loves more than a classicalist singer. And listen, thank you again. It's been a real pleasure. What shall we end with? I mean, we've played all these songs during the programme. I'll let you pick the final record. Which is the song of all your albums that you're most proud of?
I love The Prayer with Lulu. Lulu's great. She's a real professional, a real consummate professional, and I loved working with her. We did quite a few concerts together as well, and she's a real star. We had a great time making the record. Just had a really good time with her.